to Desert Island Comics, and I'm very excited about our guest today because it's not often that you can introduce a comic artist as a British national treasure, but today we can, because our castaway is the queen of cartoons. She's the Jane Austen of comic art, the Judi Dench of draftsmanship. Please be upstanding for Posy Simmonds. Welcome, Posy.
Thank you very much for that. I don't know where to look, but I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you.
You are really quite close to Jane Austen, aren't you? And the subject of your work has always been kind of exposing the fragility of the pretentious middle classes, but you haven't actually gone and explored any sort of modern equivalent of Jane Austen. I mean, have you ever been tempted to look at Jane Austen's work?
I have considered it, but perhaps also because I know it almost too well. That I've chosen Hardy and Flaubert, although it wasn't the immediate thing. Oh, I'm going to take a 19th century classic novel and do something of it. It's kind of how it arrived.
So when you say it wasn't the intention, but that's how they ended up. Do you plan out your books carefully in advance, or do you sort of slightly let them go, sort of develop as they go along?
I would do an outline of the story, and with Gemma Bovery, I remember I thought, well, I'll do 25 episodes up the spout. So I did 25 episodes, and then I thought I'd sort of climb on the back of it, rather like Dickens did, and sort of ride it. But my rate of production wasn't as fast as the rate of publication. So by the end, I was only about 5 episodes ahead. So it was very hairy.
Well, listen, it's time. You're off to this desert island. You've got your comics. What's the first book that you're going to take?
I'm going to start with Mouse.
Mouse, okay.
Yes, because that coincided with my beginning to read comics again, and I was absolutely grabbed by it. And when I say I hadn't read comics, I read a huge amount of comics as a child. And when I was about 11, the school I went to, comics were utterly forbidden. So after that, apart from a few sort of teenage romance things, I didn't really read comics until the 1980s. And then I read a review of Mouse and bought it and was completely bowled over by it, just as a document of the Holocaust, but also this extraordinary relationship between the author and his father, who was an absolutely impossible man to live with. But what is extraordinary is that all the horror and the macabre happenings are balanced by this kind of humor and love for this very, very difficult parent.
I suppose the love goes without saying, but it is definitely about the difficulty of that relationship, the difficulty of being a second generation survivor of the Holocaust, and a lot of the guilt that Artie feels.
There's a very good bit in it where Artie is actually, he's got his mouse mask on, and he becomes smaller and smaller until he's a child in a chair, and he sort of analyzes this terrible thing of feeling awful guilt for really resenting his father, and also his father is very, very mean. Any leftover food he takes back to the supermarket. An incredibly irritating parent. And so you feel this burden that Artie feels of both this irritating parent, but this a terrible guilt of being the second generation of somebody who survived the Holocaust.
There's also this whole business, obviously, about the animal identities. which I don't think anybody has ever quite pinned down exactly what it's doing. The Germans are not cats and the Jews are not mice. They're all human beings, quite clearly.
Yes.
They are human
Yes.
beings. And indeed, from time to time, Artie himself is a human being simply wearing a mouse mask, and other times he actually has a mouse head. What's your take on what all of this means?
It gives the viewer a kind of a space between the awfulness of the story. It sort of puts it slightly at length. If they were real faces, I don't think they would work so much. They would be distracting. It's almost like a no play that you have these rather stylized masks, if you yes, indeed they are masks at some point.
It kind of, I suppose, it partially anonymizes or generalizes the experience at the same time as the voices are incredibly personal.
Yes, they are. I know some of it was recorded, but Artie has a sort of amazing ear for dialogue.
Absolutely. And you're right that it was recorded,
yeah.
but I think the thing that stays with you when you finish the book is the voice of Vladek, the voice of his father, because it's not just that he recorded his words, but the way he transliterated those words into text, changing the spelling to force you, the reader, to speak in your mind in the voice of his father was absolutely masterful. So it's the voice of his father that stays with you so clearly.
Absolutely. It and the way that verbs are put at the end, and yes, you hear the accent. Absolutely. No, it's a brilliant piece of writing.
Have you ever come across Art Spiegelman yourself?
Yes, I had the good fortune to interview him. It was at the ICA, and we're about the same generation, and we found that as children, we were fans of Davy Crockett. He was a hero of the Alamo, and I knew the song of Davy Crockett, and I sang it with Art Spiegelman on stage, which was Davy, Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier.
Well, I do recognise that. Let's move on. Have you been drawing all of your life, or did you come to it late? When did you start?
I think as soon as I could hold a pencil and make a mark, I never stopped really. That's what my parents said.
Looking at your room there, you've got masses of files and books and things around you. Did you have an example of some of your earliest work that you were going to show?
I fished something out. This is probably, I was about 9 when I did that.
Amazing. That's a beautiful picture, but what the hell is going on there? Marilyn Monroe goes shooting.
Yes,
Where is she shooting?
I mean, I didn't realize she had bosoms.
Also, she doesn't know how to pull a trigger.
No, she doesn't know how to pull a trigger. But she's got very stylish shoes and socks and things on.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for that. I think it's time to hear what your second book choice is going to be.
It's When the Wind Blows by Raymond Briggs.
Wonderful. And why is this going?
This was a sort of realization of being a child of the 50s and 60s. I mean, I sort of grew up with the bomb hanging, as a threat.
The book itself really focuses on a couple who are really the older generation, aren't they?
They're an older generation. They're really, they're
kind of Raymond Briggs's parents.
Raymond Briggs's parents who lived through the war. And there's this counterpoint throughout the book about Hitler, about the Blitz of muddling through, but with also the instructions that Jim, who goes to the public library and reads newspapers, has garnered. And then it's the sort of naivety of his wife, who, when the 3-minute warning goes, she's left washing on the line. She wants to get it in, and Jim actually has to drag her into this rather pathetic shelter that they've made out of doors propped against the wall. Again, I mean, it's a macabre story, sort of leavened. I mean, the balance between the horror and then the humour is very beautifully done.
It's the horror of what's actually happening and the enormous affection for Jim and Hilda that you feel. They're so innocent. They didn't even really understand the Second World War, did they? They you know, to them the Second World War was this sort of happy time of you know, we muddled through it, you know, and you know, the dear old Uncle Joe Stalin and things like that. You have this feeling of them always having been kind of out of touch.
Yes.
And
but you feel that about people now who are twittering on about, you know, Brexit and, you know, we'll stand alone and all that. Yes, you feel echoes of it still. And in fact, now that with COVID-19, there's a kind of, you know, the government telling you what to do. I mean, it's kind of quite pertinent in a way.
So, yeah, one could almost imagine Jim and Hilda saying, "Oh, do you think it's anything to do with that 5G mast they've been putting up out there?"
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
When the bomb goes off, there's an extraordinary page, which is double-page spread, which is white with just sort of pink around the edges, which is extraordinary.
And that the page after the bomb goes off has got this incredible effect, hasn't it? Where the actual panels themselves have been disrupted by the effect of the bomb, and they kind of wobble and sort of shake and eventually sort of come back to reality. And then I think Jim says something like, "Blimey."
Yes, that's right. That's right.
It's another book, I suppose, in which the artist is really writing about his parents' experience of the war. In that sense, it's not a million miles away from Mouse, actually, if you think about it.
No, and I would say that with Raymond particularly, you see his parents creeping in, or his world, or where he lives in Sussex.
You know Raymond Briggs as well, do you?
Yes, I do, yes.
Did he sign your book?
He signed a book, and we have a conversation about Brussels sprouts because he hates them and I rather like them. And so often I've sent him a card with a Brussels sprout on. And he once sent me some Brussels sprout seeds. Yes, he's an amazing man.
That's the greatest non sequitur I've ever heard. He once sent me some Brussels sprout seeds. He's an amazing man. Your standards for amazing men are not very high. I must send you some seeds. But it's interesting you've chosen both of these books. They revolve around the relationship between the author and the parents. I mean, your parents supported your drawing, didn't you, when you were growing up?
They did. My father gave me the most amazing present. It was a ream, which is 500 sheets of elephant-sized paper, cartridge paper, a sort of really thick paper. I couldn't lift it or anything. And elephant size is huge. And it lasted all my childhood. I mean, up until I was, doing A-level art. At the time, I was pleased. And later on, I was amazingly touched at this thoughtful present.
Okay. So what is your third choice?
Britain and Brew Lightly, Hannah Berry.
Possibly not as well known as the first two books.
Well, it's a noir, very noir thriller. And Britain is this very cynical, he's a sort of private detective, and he's remorseful of all the damage he's done to people during his investigations. So his name is Britain. The Brew Lightly is this sidekick is a tea bag. It's a talking tea, which is completely mad, and that's what I rather like about Hannah's book. That it's slightly crazy. It's very nicely drawn. It's very noir.
It's kind of magical realist noir, isn't it?
Yes, and it's got a lot of very filmic character to the drawings. Lots of extraordinary perspectives and points of view. So it's a rich brew.
And is there something about this particular one that means you want to keep it sort of so close to you?
I suppose the other thing about it is, and what pleases me a great deal, is that the fact that Hannah, along with lots and lots of women now, are in comics, and that I think is a very good thing. One could mention all kinds of people. Kate Charlesworth, of course, is my generation, but Isabel Greenberg, Emily Carroll,
Yes.
Carrie Fransman, who done 2 or 3 very interesting ones. In France, there is, of course, Catherine Meurice, who has done many extraordinary books, but one of them, which is about the Charlie Hebdo massacre, which she was part of, is an extraordinary piece of work.
While we're talking about this sort of almost like the new wave of British female artists, you mentioned that you went to art school. Were you snapped up by the first place you applied to?
When I left school, I sent my portfolio off, and I applied at the wrong time and got turned down. And so I was incredibly upset at this. And I can remember going to pick my portfolio up. It was at the Central School of Art, and I was really upset. And I was going along a corridor, and a man was coming towards me who stopped me. He said, "Oh, bad luck, didn't you get in?" I said, "No." He said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'll maybe have to apply next year." And he said, "Show me your portfolio." So I went into a room, showed him the portfolio, and he said, "Well, I'm the head of pre-diploma, and you'll have to leave your portfolio behind, and it'll have to be looked at by various other people, and we'll let you know." So I left it behind, and then in about, I don't know, a month, I got the thing that I could be in the foundation, the pre-diploma. So that was a relief.
Okay, so it's time for your 4th book. What's it going to be?
I think this is the Ros Shast one. Can't we talk about something more pleasant? And I now realise this has got an awful lot to do with Mouse and quite a lot to do with the Raymond Briggs book, in that this is an extraordinary record of Ros Shast, who's a very, very good cartoonist on the New Yorker and other things. And it's about the decline and deaths of her parents, which sounds sad and tragic. Again, it's also terribly funny. Her father is this rather meek, loving, rather accommodating man, and her mother, who is a teacher, head teacher, is a real sort of bruiser, and a blast from Shast was something that you quaked and were utterly, blasted out by. There's a wonderful diagram of the things of doom, the things that her mother said would kill you, including being hit by deadly baseball bats or from infected mascara wands. You're dead, from that. I mean, it's very, very funny. And it's also very, very touching. It's also full of rage about how irritating her parents are, how I think most children feel the weight of their parents' decline, thinking, "Oh Christ, have they got to come and live with me? How can I stand that?" It's and full of the things like seeing someone suffer.
Yes.
I think, "I can't bear you. I wish you'd die, and get it over with." I mean, it's very kind of honest about that.
But she particularly had this terribly difficult relationship with her mother, where at the point of her mother's death, neither of them were quite able to say that they loved each other, which was, I thought it was incredibly depressing.
I thought that was depressing, and it was a sort of counterpoint to the fact that she was able to say to her father that she did.
Absolutely.
When he died.
I wanted to say that there's an extraordinary passage that I recall towards the end of this book, where she switches from the very almost shaky cartoon style, almost rhubarb and custody sort of, to
Mm,
suddenly having these photographs of the pointless things that are left behind in her
yeah.
parents' apartment after they've gone. Totally hits you as a reader.
And also at the end of the book, she does their actual drawings she's made of her mother on her
Oh,
deathbed,
oh
which
my
are,
God.
which are really almost unbearable to look at.
It really makes you consider your own mortality and responsibility and, you know, generations and family. Something you may well want to do on a desert island, you know.
I just hope it wouldn't be a tropical desert island, because I know too much about natural history, and I know there'd be sandflies and crabs and all kinds of things.
Well, if you'd like it, you know, you could go to somewhere in the north of Scotland.
Could I? Well, I'd quite like that. They'd be good
Okay.
birds.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, what's your fifth and final book going to be?
This is a book by David Prudhomme, and it's called Rebetiko. Rebetiko is a style of Greek music, and it's played on the bouzouki and sometimes on the guitar. And the songs are about crime and poverty and prostitution and violence and fights.
It's kind of
And
Greek street music from the early 20th century, isn't it?
yes, the book happens just in one day, and it's set in the 1930s when, with the rise of Greek fascism, put a clamp down on this kind of outsider, you know, rebellious, decadent music, rebetiko. And it follows the day of Stavros and his friends. It includes violence. It includes stealing along the way, and they eventually end up in a taverna. And it's the only one I've read where you could actually hear the music in the drawings. So then when they start playing and singing, I find it absolutely extraordinary. He's a wonderful draftsman. And then at the end, it shows what this music has become now, which is really, you know, stuff for tourists to listen to in tavernas. I stayed in Greece. I stayed in Athens for quite a long time when I was a student. In fact, I was supposed to go there as an English governess, and in the morning I was an employee. I had to wear, in terrific heat, I had to wear a black dress. In the afternoon, I became the English Miss, and I was talked to about culture and things. And that's when one of the people in the household told me about Rebetiko, and so it was something I knew about.
I see. So Posy, you've got your 5 books. You're off to the Orkney Islands somewhere. Now we are allowing you to take your favourite type of biscuit and your favourite flavour of crisps. So have you made any choices there?
Yes, I think biscuits, if it's kind of, you know, one out of the supermarket, would just be plain old ginger nut. But would I be allowed to take the ones I make myself, which are chocolate chip with pecan in?
Chocolate chip ginger nuts with pecan.
No, not ginger nuts. Just chocolate chip
Oh,
cookies with pecan and chocolate chips in.
we will definitely allow you to take those, but the only catch is you have to take the ingredients and cook them while you're there.
Right.
And
Thank
don't
you.
tell me you make homemade crisps as well.
No, certainly not. And the crisps, I think, will just be plain, ordinary plain crisps, but some salt, please.
Ready salted crisps. Okay. Do you eat a lot of those, or is it just, you know?
Not a lot. They have done in the past. Have done.
Okay. So ready salted crisps, incredibly exciting sounding biscuits, and a wonderful selection of books. Posy, it's been absolutely fascinating chatting with you and hearing about your thoughts and looking at your amazing pictures from when you were a child. Thank you very, very much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in the future in the Lake District.
Peter, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it hugely.
Ladies and gentlemen, Posy Simmonds.